Hello, everybody. Welcome to this wonderful launch event that we're having tonight. Before we begin, I'd just like to respectfully acknowledge the wisdom of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their custodianship of the lands and waterways. The countries on which Spinifex offices are situated are Jiru, Bunurong, Wurundjeri, Wadawurrung, Eora and Noongar. We also acknowledge the many women throughout history who have fought for women's freedom and the freedom of lesbians, often at the cost of their lives. So, what we're going to do tonight is we've got, actually don't know, I think there are 13 speakers all up. Pauline is trapped in a traffic jam. She will appear at some point and will be able to speak when she does. So I'm just going to, I'm going to introduce everybody. First of all, I introduce myself, which I'm Susan Hawthorne. I live and work on Jiru country, and I'm a poet, a novelist, a political commentator, and a former aerialist. That's about the length of the bios we have tonight. Now, Pauline Hopkins who is the #1 Eagle Eye editor, she suggested that we do this book in 2021, but we already had too many books, and so it became a 2022 book, and now it's a 2023 book. It's a companion to Not Dead Yet, which was an anthology of feminists over 70 writing about their lives. I was 6 months too young to contribute to that book, which was a bit of a shame. Both books are celebrations of the more than 30 years that Spinifex has existed. Last week, we had our 32nd birthday. I'm so very pleased to be publishing this book as it has so many brilliant contributors, but that's not for me to talk about. It's for you to hear them and for Sarah St Vincent Welch to launch the book. Now, Sarah is a Canberra-based poet who chalks poems on footpaths. Her most recent book is called Chalk Borders, and quite a few of the poems in there are chalk poems. So, Sarah, over to you to launch the book.
I'm joining you from, you can hear me?
Yep.
Good. Yep. Okay. I'm joining you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and I acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional owners, elders past and present, and I am so honoured to be asked to launch It's All Connected, Feminist Fiction and Poetry, edited by Pauline Hopkins and published by Spinifex Press. Feminist fiction and poetry, what could be better? This book leads into the 4th decade of this eminent feminist press, Spinifex. There are many pieces by authors whose work I know and love. And of course, I have been introduced to writers I should know more about. Every story, every poem contributes to a sense of connection through diverse writers and subjects, and every piece calls from deep within a woman's perspective, from all kinds of knowledge and from a continuing engagement with this struggle for equality and freedom. I found this book to be fierce and loving. I'd like to mention some moments in my experience of reading it, and I'm attempting to mention every piece. The command of a granddaughter to keep telling in the story of that name by Marion Maltino, for me called to a wider need for women to keep telling and keep listening. Retelling and reinterpreting older stories, as in About Geese by Suniti Namjoshi, is a feminist favourite and always exciting. Likewise in Agamemnon's Return from Troy by Jenna Woodhouse and Marion Campbell's Now He Dreams the Sirens Silent. Renata Klein gives voice to, for us, the voiceless, a non-human fellow creature in The Cry. Finding and fighting for one's voice is another theme, and the vulnerability felt, especially if surrounded by a dominant language, as in Melinda Bobbis's Lost Bird, is compelling. And this business of representation itself is explored skillfully in Lizz Murphy's The Poet. This is set in the isolation of lockdown, as is Angela Costi's After Dinner, and both unpick the experience. There is a call to remember in Lucy Sussex's Where the Body is Buried. Diane Bell, It's All Connected, which is of course the title of the book, explores optimistically critical community problem solving informed by feminism. 6 women climb into the vast Scatino Cave, and the story of that name by Colleen Clare, for a ritual of darkness and light dealing with the pain of women's suffering. Real Estate by Cheryl Adam particularly spoke to me from recent experiences and engages with elder abuse of older women, remarkably with a light touch. So much to identify with. I too have felt as a child the shame of being defined as a dickless wonder, just like the narrator of Jackie Duffy's The Treehouse. There is the continuing growing and changing and ageing in Laurie Ross's Coming of Age, Ready or Not, and Sue Ingleton's Alive, and Elaine by Patricia Sykes. The violence that is part of the truth of so many women's lives is examined in Aviva Shue's The End of the Mountains, in Robyn Bishop's The Lonely Road, Jenna Correa's The Thief Danced On, and 3 photographs by Carmel MacDonald Graham. And there are so many forms of violence explored in this collection, as in I Don't Post on Facebook by Colleen Higgins. I'm sorry if you're getting that ding. I don't know how to stop it. And Apostrophe to Anger by Pramila Venkateswaran. I found solace and nurture of place and its nurturing in Sandy Jeff's Christmas Hills Rhapsody and Displacement, in Carol Lefebvre's Souvenirs, and then Unbelonging and Unacceding in Miranda by Karen Higgs, and ecstatic power and contrast in the nature depicted of Usha Akella's California, Her Colour, and ecstatic solitariness in Jordie Albiston's Subaru. To quote, stuck here in the middle of everywhere. And a woman's solitariness in Birds, also Jordie Albiston, really moved me. The main character in Bulbul Sharma's The Child Thief entranced me with her urge to survive, in fact, to flourish. My Cup Runneth Over by Anne Ostby contemplates the power of language, and Educating Nanette by Susan Medalia playfully explores women's allegiance to each other, breaking the expected narrative. Enduring Form of Women's Piracy by Gina Mercer fits here too for me, but as a poem. The energy of women's bodies and thought and imaginings, Flying and Falling in Susan Hawthorne's Ulysses, and Cowrie's Return by Kath Coa-Dunsford has got me flying too. In The Thickness of Choice by Fiona Place, the naming of a girl child embraces the centrality of the control of fertility and choice. Page by Pauline Hopkins, also the editor, who should be roundly congratulated on this wonderful book, unfolds women's encounters with modern medicine, the disconnectedness when we should be connected. Get Back In by Angela Buckingham, to me, asks, should we conform or not conform? We Come to Light by Bernie Janssen graces us with Our Earth, Our Home, a celebration of colours. And Life, in Jordie Albiston's Wimmera, concludes the collection. I'm aware I've travelled quickly through It's All Connected, and I could have grouped and described the stories and poems in so many ways. This was just one woman's way, one feminist's way. And to me, that attests to just how connected it is and we are. I recommend it to you and congratulate Spinifex Press and every member of the press all the authors, the editor, everyone making and promoting the book. And I am so thrilled that we will be hearing from some of the authors soon. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Sarah. That's wonderful. I'm amazed you managed to get through it all and to mention every contributor to the book. So thank you very, very much. Diane Bell is going to start. She is a Professor Emerita at ANU, the author of prize-winning books on her work with Aboriginal women, and also a novelist and much more. In fact, everybody is much more than I can say tonight.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Sarah, for your thoughtful words in launching It's All Connected. I acknowledge the Ngunnawal on whose country I currently live and pay my respects for their continuing care of country and their enduring stories. I've been thinking about why, in a time of alternate facts, dissembling and barefaced lies, writing and reading feminist fiction and poetry is so important. By training, I'm an anthropologist, and I like to imagine the reader is there in the ethnographic present, grounded in the politics of a particular place and encountering specific characters. At the same time, I want the reader to be here, reflecting on the what now of the moment. This sense of being here and being there opens the space for fictional imagining and reimagining. I can take liberties that would be ethnographic suicide. I can invent a range of characters and invite the reader to watch what happens when they spring into life in places I know well, and they can explore ideas of consequence. Oh, the cockies are out. Ethical dilemmas abound. Representations are contested. Decade-old debates rage. My anthropological sleuth, called D. Scrutari, does scrutinise. In lieu of footnotes, she shares her field notes as the characters reveal their backstories and play out their plot-driven hands. Dee made her debut in 2005 in Evil, a Novel, where she turned her anthropological gaze onto a tribe of non-reproducing males, i.e. the priestly caste who dominate St. Jude's, a fictional liberal arts college on the east coast of the USA. Evil, Dee wrote, is visceral, palpable, not an abstract conceit at all. Prescient Dee. Dee finds ritual performances to be rich field sites. She decoded the royal wedding and the funeral for friends, the sovereign citizens and the vaccine rollout. They're all grist for her mill. And now being there. From 2005 to 2013, I lived on the banks of the Finniss River, which flows into the Murray River as it nears the Southern Ocean. It's Ngarrindjeri country. Their stories warn of dramatic consequences of taking more than one needs. Their knowledge of the river as a living body stands in stark contrast to the extractive mode of irrigators. As the drought began to bite, increased salinity killed fish, tortoises, vegetation, dairy farms abandoned, vineyards sinking bores. But water is a finite resource. Out of the chaos emerged unlikely coalitions. I worked with a local action group, marvelled at the solidarity of rural communities, what they can exhibit when there's a clear external enemy. Sadly, it cannot be sustained. What might have been? Dee is on the job. She is reimagining the decade. It's all connected, her Ngarrindjeri friends tell her. It's all connected, say the ecologists. In her fictional world, she maps the kin connections, histories, sporting interests, schools attended across the diverse stakeholders. But how to make them manifest? Why, music, of course. Dee loves a good musical. And it turns out that Gilbert and Sullivan has a long history for these folks. Thus begins Murray the musical. Bookkeeper Joyce sings, "I've got a little list," and manages the fate of the water rorters. The science students sing, "Three little girls from school are we," and they manage to rhyme it with hyperbole. Dairy farmer Dave, the very model of a modern major general, with many cheerful facts about the pollies who are best to schmooze. And so it comes to pass. Climate change becomes a character, lying awake with a dreadful headache, And like all good Gilbert and Sullivan plots, salinity is unmasked as the evil twin of greed and much more, but you'll have to read it. To conclude, congratulations to all at Spinifex for this handsome book, and a special thanks to Pauline Hopkins for her planning and careful editing. It's a worthy companion to the non-fiction anthology Not Dead Yet that marked the 30th anniversary of Spinifex Press. Susan and Renata, your continued dedication to bringing feminist writing to the reading public enhances all our lives. And unlike most publishers, Spinifex maintains a backlist. Our histories are not swept away. And in the case of our fiction, our imaginings endure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Di. Yes, and I love it when you sing in the middle of a story.
I can't help myself.
Our next speaker is Patricia Sykes. Patricia is a prize-winning poet, a librettist, and she is a former tightwire walker in Melbourne's Women's Circus, among other many talents.
Good. Thank you for that lovely, comprehensive launch, Sarah. Lovely and inclusive. I live and write on Wurundjeri country, part of the Kulin Nation, which also includes, to the west of Melbourne, includes the Wabberong. And it was also where I was living when my mother died, which is the memory of place in the poem in the collection. I'd like to say how delighted I am to be in another Spinifex anthology. It broadens my anthology communities, gives me the opportunity to read work I might not otherwise come across. Gilbert and Sullivan, I loved it, Di. I was in the Pirates of Penzance. And I'd like to extend my thanks to Spinifex Press for what they do, their untiring commitment to women writers and writing. As Susan has mentioned, we met when we both joined the Women's Circus. I was 50. Susan went on to become a rather daring aerialist. I fell in love with the tightrope, although my tightropes now are metaphoric rather than actual, I must say. But it gave birth to my first Spinifex collection of poetry, my first collection of poetry, which was called Wire Dancing. I came to poetry late, mostly because my mother died when we were children, and we spent a few years in orphanages and then went out to work at 14. I was fortunate to become a mature age student, got into university after Whitlam abolished university fees. So I did a BA honours in modern poetry. And I finally, after I got to Circus, where the body started opening and letting a bit more courage out, decided if I was ever going to write poetry, I'd better get on with it. The poem I'm going to read grew out of the experience of my mother's death. My older sister and I, for whom the poem was written, are on the political spectrum. She's often complaining to me about greenies. I was Education Development Officer for the Wilderness Society. As she sees no irony in that, but it's a testament that because we were orphaned in childhood, while we're chalk and cheese, we're 13 months apart, and we have bonded in the way only women and sisters can, through tragedy, trauma, and loyalty to each other no matter what. The poem is simply called Elaine, for my sister on her 80th. And the inscription is Elaine, sun ray shining light, French variant of Helen. You and I, how we fell into life like spiderlings on silk threads. One breeze too many or too less, and we'd have ended, who knows where, as a shimmering accident. Between them, Big Bang and God might claim the universe, but didn't we know as we climbed and spun exactly where a third power lived? In our hours of play, didn't we know we inhabited a world where children live amazed at the ignorance of adults? You and I, and the lives we shed like tadpoles on the way to legs. Did we really lose these to maturity? Where are the happinesses we dreamed between hatchling and storm? In our flooded paddock, low-hanging branches were all we ever needed to swing us above the deeps we mocked. So how did we arrive at age's sober spot? Was it years of weathering that stripped the aura from innocence? You and I, and the games we perfected, what now? Is true only true if you perform a thing right? We glow in the dark. We age further towards youth. Perhaps we rooted so earthily, so deep, so that now we can flower in a way that balances the grief and joy of things.
Thank you. Thank you, Trish. It's very moving. Marion May Campbell is our next speaker. Marion is a poet, novelist and academic who's taught literature and creative writing and has been doing so for really a very long time.
Thank you so much, Susan, and Sarah, and Diane and Patricia for those beautiful, moving readings. Yeah, I just want to honour the work that Spinifex has done. You, Susan, with Renata, it's magnificent over more than 3 decades, has been said, and all power to you. And let's celebrate that. I think tonight is a great celebration, even now, of the work that you've encouraged and nurtured. I'm coming from Kunai country, and which is unceded, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, emerging, and their care for this partly ruined country. It's wonderful to be in such fabulous company tonight, and in It's All Connected. I just want to say a little bit about writing, which for me, I think has always been about resistance too, and an attempt to transfigure the myths informing patriarchal practices that oppress and violate women bodily and psychologically. But this resistance has always been fueled by an ardor and a passion to connect through this transfigured imaginary that's our collective work. It's not individual, it's a work that's been elaborated through centuries by myriad feminist and lesbian writers. In my poem, which I'm about to read, I respond to Walter Benjamin's response to Kafka's prose poem, The Silence of the Sirens, in which Kafka's friend and executor Max Brod, who spoke of Kafka's horror of enveloping orchestral music, which gave him a sense of drowning. This perhaps motivated his attribution of silence to the sirens. Odysseus was ecstatic, according to him, not because, unlike his wax-plugged crew, he could hear them, but because they were silent. What he was listening to, like alas, many men, was his own song imagined for them and replacing their voices, usurping their voices. Well, given Kafka's reduction of Felix Bauer, with whom he was twice engaged, to a mere F, in this very modest way, I try to make a stand for the silencing of women through patriarchal myth in all its material and embodied implications. Now he dreams the sirens silent. Within the roar of his blood, within the trough the winds carve for his boat, mast-tied, beeswax plugged. He keeps no company. His fiancée's letters all dissolved right to the remnant F. He knows the oceanic terror of music, that ineluctable drowning. He must forgo seduction, forgo the crew to be plunged into untold silence. And so the sirens swing him by, their nipples scorching suns, their claws excoriating the cliff's blue limestone, their throats open beyond all earthly operatics. Harry a key, he'd written F, when she still clung to the initial. And one day beyond the window-blind city, there will be a door that will open for you. The sirens now sing in his dream. Only in the radiance of seascape's illumination, only in her evanescence will you lend her the right key. If we'd been singing when we saw you cruise by ecstatic, we would have mouthed sadly, nothing works anymore, baby. History has stuttered you between us cliffhangers and the tone-deaf sailors. There's no code, no key, now that you loom, bitter ghost, beyond all Penelopes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Marion. It's great. It's actually really wonderful to hear people reading their poems. It's fantastic. Okay, and our next reader is Lizz Murphy, our next speaker. She's a poet, an artist, a very fine promoter of literary and arts events. She used to be the publicist for Spinifex in another life, and she's a former Canberra Times poetry editor. Over to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Susan, and I'd like to add my immense gratitude to Susan and Renata and everyone at Spinifex Press, and also thanks and congratulations to Pauline for this very beautiful anthology. I'm thrilled to be in it, and I'm thrilled to be here. It's just magic. So Bynalong, New South Wales, where I live, is in unceded Ngunnawal and Wiradjuri countries. It's on the edge, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. So I'm going to read you my poem, and I thought my poem, The Poet, fitted into the theme very nicely, and I'm so glad that Pauline thought that too. It's one of those times when different moments in life somehow start to fit together, and before you know it, all the dots have connected to make a poem. And I'd like to acknowledge artist and poet Lily Prigen-Ero, whose painting of the same title inspired this poem. And this came about when the painting was used as a prompt by the Ekphrastic Journal, which you might be familiar with. Lily, who lives in Italy, is also a fellow follower of the Billy Collins poetry broadcast and the FB group Cool Night, Cool People. And that was another connection. And I think that was actually why I took an interest in the painting in the first place, because I was already familiar with her name in a lovely community, talking about all the different communities we have. And I love the idea of the anthology communities. Thank you, Patricia. The poet. A photographer makes a study of the poet Walt Whitman. At a future time, an artist makes a watercolor and drawing from this image, frames it, hangs it in a cafe. A poet arrives at this same cafe for breakfast, sits at the back table under this Walt Whitman. She eats and writes and thinks. In deep thought, she rests her chin in her hand. A smiling man strides towards her. I'm sorry, I just have to tell you, you look exactly like the picture behind. She turns to see, is surprised, even though she has taken notice of this portrait on many occasions. Oh, you again, Walt always says. She is also pleased, and she says, I'm trying, ironically, to do the same thing here, right. Later, she wishes she had a photo of herself, chin and fist, in front of Walt, chin and fist. Instead, she Googles the original Whitman photograph and does her own rendition from it in pencil. She gets a blog post out of it and a documentation of that particular day when bare earth too slowly washed green and groves of sorry trees curled their leaves early in the pandemic. Meanwhile, an artist posts her painting of a man in another cafe who by chance or not is another poet. The first poet in a cafe finds this painting striking, the black and white tiled foreground dramatic, the two turquoise ice cream posters like windows onto the world on a bright day. They make the ochre walls and tablecloths glow. The poet in the painting merges charcoal overcoat into charcoal pew. One contented hand rests in the other on the table, his face more studious. There may be an actual window out onto the world, and he could be gazing at life unfolding, unraveling. He might be drifting off into his own world, the one in his head. There is nothing on his table. He has just arrived, is waiting for coffee or a meal, a simple cheese sandwich, a bowl of the homemade ice cream, or he is already satiated. Everything cleared away, just him left sitting. He may be a regular and the staff say, oh, he's just the poet, let him sit. He is finding his way with the world, finding his way with words. Some days it takes time. Let him have an extra serve. The artist who has painted the splashes of light, the lowering shadows, the curiosities on the shelf high above his head, could be perched at the opposite end of that cafe with her easel and canvas, or just with a camera to take the photo to paint from after. She is a poet as well, so we come full circle. The painted scene could easily be during a pandemic when most people are at home self-isolating, and those necessarily out are in need of socially distant succor from this essential workers providing food in eerily quiet cafes and staring out of their windows, wondering where it will all end and who will get a poem out of it.
Poets.
Thank you very much.
I'd just like to let you all know that Pauline is here now, which is wonderful. So our next person to speak is Gina Mercer. Gina is Tasmania-based, former editor of Island magazine and many other former things. She's also a poet and a novelist. Over to you, Gina.
Thank you, Susan. And I'm coming to you from the land of the Muanina people and Pakana peoples in Lutruwita, Tasmania. Someone recently asked me, why do you write? And I sort of said, well, because I can't help myself, basically. And when I took that a little bit further, it comes from the deep desire to connect with women and to give voice to women's worlds. And so I want to add my incredible gratitude to Susan and Renata and all the brilliant women who've ever worked at Spinifex over the last 32 years. So I want to deliver a large, dark blue ocean swell size flow of gratitude to all of you, to just say that's an incredible thing and it means so much and has made such a difference to the Australian conversation about writing and words and what's possible and what's supported, and it's sustained all of us, and I think you've just done an incredible job. So thank you. And also to Pauline, who I haven't met, but having survived a couple of anthologies in my career, I know how hard they are to do and how tricky it is. So thank you, Pauline, for persevering and making it happen, and it's been a real honour to be included. I will just say one funny thing was that in 2021 I had to have brain surgery, and when I came home from the hospital, having only just felt like I survived, there was a friend of mine, Betty McClellan, had sent a copy of Not Dead Yet, and it was on my table when I came home, which always makes me laugh whenever I pick up that particular anthology, but that's anyway, the poem I'm going to read is very short. It's in the form of an elevensies, and now the elevensies is a new form invented by Kerry Shine, who is a New South Wales poet of proud Wiradjuri and Chinese heritage, and I just love the fact that she thought, bugger it, there's no poems in the right form for me, I'll just make one up. I just really admire that kind of creativity and willingness to just change everything. So so the form is 5 lines and then a central line which is in the middle and is like a title, but the poem doesn't itself have a title, and then there's another 5 lines, and yeah, that does add up to 11 anyway. So the middle line for me in some senses is like the spine of a book or a bird, and the 5 lines on either side are like the wings of the poem that kind of carry it off. And the reason I'm talking about that is because the central line of this poem is a quote from Susan Hawthorne, who was talking at a digital publishing workshop or conference in Sydney in 2009. And someone was asking her about the difficulties with piracy in the digital world. And she sort of said, well, women have been piratical in regards to the written word ever since books were invented, and talked about the ways in which women have constantly, and as a form of resistance often and subversion, shared books as a way of building intellectual communities and companionship, even when that wasn't supposed to be what women did. And so I wanted to give credit to that quote. Susan, I don't know if you even remember saying it, but yes.
No, I don't.
It's in my brain, so apparently it happened. I don't know. Anyway, the poem is short and it doesn't have a title, but the central line is enduring form of women's piracy. A crooked stack of books waits on the weathered table. Pile of possibility for a friend who's thinking of writing a new world. Enduring form of women's piracy. Passing books we love, hand to work strong hand, sparking words, mouth to mouth. Fomenting gentle revolutions, making stacks of our own.
Thank you. I don't remember it, but how wonderful is it to have poets who take notes when they're in audience.
They're always listening, yeah.
That's fabulous. Our next speaker is Sandy Jeffs. She is a prize-winning poet, mental health advocate, and long-time hockey player. She's the goalie.
I am the goalkeeper. I have ballistic missiles hit at me every weekend. So Sue, thank you so much for your continued advocacy for women writers, giving them a voice, because Really, I wouldn't have had a voice if it hadn't been for Spinifex. Really, you gave me a voice to talk about mental health issues, to talk about madness. You gave me a voice where nobody else would have given me a voice. So I really appreciate that. And for you to enable so many other women to have their voice and to be heard in the wider world is such a precious gift that you've given them. So all power to you and Renata for doing that. And for me, you know, you published 5 of my books. I mean, that's a lot. And, some have been duds, unfortunately, but really, it's just been wonderful to have a publishing house who believes in me as a writer, because you know we don't get much validation as writers out there. All it is having our egos battered by rejections and being battered by you know, so-called other poets in the world, and so to be validated is such a nice thing, because we all need validation. Thank you, Pauline, for including me in this anthology. I didn't expect to be in it. In a way, I fail Feminism 101. I'm not very good. I'm a terrible feminist, but I do try really hard. But my poem is more about belonging and being connected. It is about it's all connected. I live in a place called Christmas Hills. It's north of Melbourne. It's about an hour's drive from the CBD. And it's in the Yarra Valley. We're in the hills around the Yarra Valley. And I've been there for 44 years with my partners, Robbie and Dido, and our currently 3 dogs and 2 cats and 3 dogs. So it's a menagerie, and 7 chooks. And my poem is a celebration of where I live. And also, I'm on Wurundjeri country. Sorry, I'm on Wurundjeri country, the land of the Kulin Nation. And we acknowledge their storytellers and their oral tradition. We do acknowledge all that. So I'm just going to read very briefly from my poem, three little sections from it. It's actually an epic. I never thought I'd write this epic, and I don't know why it took 44 years for me to get around to writing it, but I did eventually to celebrate where I live. So this is section number 3, section number 4, and section number 6, and they're not too long. So 3. I am bound for my Christmas Hills anchorage, where scrubby eucalypts with chaotic canopies like grand monarchs stand tall, and gullies of tussock grass rumble downwards to dams, and orchids are sprinkled like fairy dust on the leaf-littered ground. I feel so blessed that, after a long odyssey through the city's asphalt streets, dark places of menacing man-made design, I can return to my quiet wonderland. And this homeward journey is necessary to salve my threadbare soul, made ragged by the assault of urban warlords. This humble place amongst the gums is my shelter and sanity. 4. The ageless land on which we trespass, and from whose core we have strayed, nevertheless is my home, where I have walked and slumbered, cackled and cried for over 40 years, a blip in First Nations time, but for my few stolen years, it seems ever so long. And finally 6. And yet these hills console me, wrapping me in a sylvan rug, where I am snug against the railing storms, where time is tamed briefly and I can loaf and loiter without care, just knowing I am in the midst of this ancient land, not having to step out amongst it, but to watch it from my window gives me comfort. And to see the rainbow lorikeets and king parrots bluster around, to hear the magpies warble and the jester laughing kookaburras, all a symphonic chorus, soothes my troubles. I am forever moved to great emotion, bigger and stronger than I am able to give to words. Thanks, Sue, and thanks everybody. That's Christmas Hills Rhapsody. I love where I live, and I hope to be here forever, but of course it won't happen. Thank you.
It's a beautiful place. Now, our next speaker is Lucy Sussex. Lucy has been a journalist and a reviewer. You will have seen her name in The Age and elsewhere. A writer of crime and speculative fiction. So, and much more. I mean, everybody, much more.
Thank you. I'm speaking from Naarm on the unceded land of the Kulin Nation, and I give all my thanks to the elders, past, present, and particularly future. Now, what I have to say is more in the nature of a memoir. Susan and I go way back to the Penguin Australian Women's Library, which was an initiative to bring back the wonderful work of women in the past, the contribution of women to Australian literature. And it so happened that I had edited a book by Mary Fortune, who was a journalist, a crime writer, a bigamist, the mother of a bank robber, and much, much more. And which happened to be at the wrong publisher, because but through a process of feminist networking, Susan got hold of it and published it. And not only that, and I think this is indicative of how Susan has seized the day and much else. A little while later, I happened to win a science fiction short story award. And Susan said to me, "Have you got enough stories for a collection?" And I thought, now that's a very interesting thought. Can I get back to you? Now, this is in the far days before personal computers, and I'd typewritten all my stories. So I literally had to go off and count all the stories, published and unpublished. And then I came back the next day and said, yes, I have enough stories for a collection. And it duly came out with another publisher, but that's another story entirely. Publishing is full of swings and outrageous strange things. It's a mad industry, and I really credit Spinifex for keeping their sanity in publishing and keeping going and producing so many wonderful books. Now, I want to fast forward slightly to the beginnings of Spinifex, and I was there. I happened to meet Susan at a literary do, and she said, "What are you writing?" And I said, "I'm writing a story about against surrogacy." And she said, "How very interesting. We have an anthology that would fit our theme, and I would like to see your story when it is finished." I said, "Okay." A couple of days later, she rang up and said, "Have you finished the story yet?" I said, "Not yet." And I got the strong impression I should put my skates on. So I literally finished it overnight, and it's about time. We were all living in North Melbourne, so I drove over and submitted the story in person, and it was published. And for that, which I think demonstrates so much of the virtues of Spinifex: doggedness, attention to detail, and willing to consider material that might be a bit outside the mainstream, which is why I'm so very proud to be in this anniversary volume. And as a bonus, the story Where the Body is Buried came up in the Mary Fortune research. I've just finished a co-written biography of Mary and her son, George, the bank robber. And no, this is not a pitch. And the story emerged for something I found in the research, and it's true. On the Australian goldfields, a miner who was dying and asked that the fellow miners bury him where he lay without service, just basically dig a hole and put me in it with no notification of anybody. And they did this despite strongly suspecting that the miner was really a woman in drag, a transvestite. And I strongly suspect that someday this body will be dug up in the goldfields and will puzzle the archaeologists until they discover, like the misattributed Viking warriors who turned out to be women and shaman, that here is a woman. And in this story, I honour the interesting and varied lives that women have led in Australia, and I also honour how much Spinifex has done towards this conversation. And had I a glass of wine, I would toast Spinifex, but thank you so very much.
Thank you. Yes, I really enjoyed reading your story because it was a bit of a surprise. Our next speaker is Robyn Bishop. She is a writer, a playwright, an actor, and a drama teacher. So over to you, Robyn. Robyn, I hope you can speak. I hope you are here. Just going to flick through.
Sorry, think I was muted.
And you were, yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll start again. I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of this anthology. It's the first anthology I've ever been in, and it's just amazing. I want to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people, to the land that I live on, and that's where I live and write. I'm a little bit nervous, but my background is mainly a theatre background, and it took me a long while to be able to write myself. So I didn't start writing my own plays until I was in my middle to late 40s. I was extremely busy. I was teaching full time and had 2 children, and did, of course, as a drama teacher, you also do lots and lots of productions with the students at school, some of which were devised with them, others that were musicals that we took and put on. So a lot of my time I've worked with young people. I've also been in a theatre and education team where we devised our own work on issues that concern young people and performed them in schools. And I've worked with a theatre group of 4 women called Girl Art, where we devised and performed our own scripts. So that's sort of my background in theatre. I got a kickstart to writing plays as a solo person, as one person, by going to a seminar in the Nova Theatre in Melbourne, and did a seminar with a man called Robert McKee, who wrote a wonderful book called Story, which was all about how to put story together. And when I came out of that, I sat in the car park under the Nova in the dark, weeping, feeling as though I'd just finally been given permission to write by myself, as opposed to working with all these other wonderful people I'd been working with. So my first play that I wrote, called Only the End, was inspired by my sister-in-law's struggle with cancer, and was chosen for the VCE, the Victorian Certificate of Education Drama playlist, and was seen and studied by Year 11 and 12 students across the state, and was published by Currency Press. It was performed at the Carlton Courthouse Theatre under the umbrella of the wonderful La Mama. And after that, I had 2 more plays produced and performed there. These plays were all based on women's stories, stories that were begging to be told. Somewhere along the line, I tried to write a novel, and I've also been an avid reader all my life. The stimulus for my first novel, The Girl in the Bath, came from a painting I saw in Parliament House during a Melbourne Writers' Festival. This was a painting of a pale, ghost-like girl who seemed to be bruised by some unseen force, and it was burnt into my imagination, and I couldn't dismiss it until I wrote her story. My second novel I sent to Pauline to edit. It was overwritten and far too descriptive. Pauline said to me, "You're obviously a playwright. You've written in all the stage directions." So with her help, I cut approximately 20,000 words out of the draft I sent her, and with her guidance, rearranged the structure of the novel. And Pauline asked me if I'd ever written short stories, and I hadn't. Well, she said, "Give it a go, because I'm putting together this anthology for Spinifex Press." And so I did give it a go, and I sent in my story, The Lonely Road. And I also found out it was really good to be given the structure of only being allowed a certain amount of words, 2,000 words. And so I came up, there was a story that had been with me for many, many years, a story about a young woman. And I tried to write it into a play or a novel for years and never quite could not find the right way to do it. So this story became a short story. It was about a girl in 1982 who was hitchhiking, who was picked up by a couple of guys, was raped, reported the rape, and then was subjected to the court system. I was called as a witness to the trial and witnessed firsthand the degradation that this young girl went through. I remember being astounded and angry and not knowing what to do about it. This was the system we were supposed to trust. It was a male system. It didn't work. It was like this young girl was, she wasn't the victim. She was seen to be the one on trial. So this is what my story, The Lonely Road, is about. And it took me a long time to be able to write this story. And now I've come to it from a different perspective of being an older woman. And this young girl is now an older woman and a survivor. So that's how I got to write The Lonely Road. And I'm so absolutely over the moon to be part of this anthology with all you incredible writers and poets. And thank you so much to Pauline and Susan and Renata for including my story. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, it's really nice to hear how these things come about. Our next speaker is Bernie Janssen. She's a poet, performance poet, and a sound artist based in rural Victoria. Bernie, are you still here? I know you might have had to have, you are still here.
No, I am. I am here, yes. Thank you. And I've just realised that it's fabulous. We talk about being all connected. The sun is coming down and I realise that here I have a piece called We Come to the Light, and the light is here, beautifully so. I'm extraordinarily honoured, as always, to be part of this wonderful Spinifex enterprise. It's remarkable being, I think I'm the last writer to speak, and I'm humbled by the people, but the women, the magnificent, diverse women that have spoken and read before me. What an absolutely extraordinary group of writing, of women, of women's writing, and what an so essential in this time to have a strong voice. I mean, it's always been essential, but it seems like at the moment it's even more important. I'm not going to say much more, except, of course, I live and work on Djadjawurrung country, and I pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. So I'm going to actually, now that I'm in the light, I'm going to dim. There we are. Dim the light and turn on, go from, I think, to real light. I'm just going to read an extract from We Come to the Light. Thunderheads pummel sky black, a lean of colour. Wind-pushed cries harbour in the squalling flap of gulls homing. Her voice is a scrap sprayed into a quiet destination. Black is the sky as it waits for the rain of stars. Black are the clouds weighted with rain. Black were the thoughts dusted with drought. Backed up. Black, the horizon. Her thoughts drop. Small seeds puff the earth, blackening. all rain to rain. Thoughts empty as the dams fill. That her gaze is astute is neither memory nor habit. The rain, a fall of thought, a soft declension when mists she. All day rain, a cloak, a veil, a comfort stroke. Spoke she, a soak of feelings, a precipitate action. Whoops. And over the page. She fall, shower fall, spit, spit, fall, shower she, a spit, spot, soft spoke shower, a sentence on the earth. She registers the forms in their complexity of light and shadow, high and low, line and point, complexion, weather of poetry. I think today we've had a magnificent array of the weather of poetry, from the sunshine to the moody clouds to the great winds ripping through. And Spinifex, I think, you know, you are a wonderful raging storm of feminism, and we thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Yeah, that's a really nice way to do that. I just received a message not too long ago that Carol Lefebvre wanted to speak. Now, Carol, I just sent you a message, but you probably didn't get it. Can you just say whether you were planning to speak or not?
Hello, Susan. Can you hear me now? I've just unmuted, I think.
Yes, that's right.
No, I had no plans at all to say anything, but and I only managed to creep in, you know, just after it had started. I was couldn't find the link or something, but it's just been, it's wonderful to be here, and yeah, just thank you so much for all of it. And I've loved everything. I've particularly Patricia Sykes brought tears to my eyes with her beautiful poem. So yes, thank you for the anthology and for everything.
Thank you. Thank you. So now then we have to hand over to Pauline. Pauline, I was so sorry that you weren't able to be here at the beginning. As I said at the beginning, this is a wonderful book. And as Sarah also said, she went through the gallop of all the different pieces, and we're all in huge fans of the book. So Pauline, can you say something? I know you want to say something. We probably would have had you at the beginning, but what's wrong with being at the end?
This is good. This is a good spot for an editor to be. So, and I'm talking to you from Bunurong country, unceded Aboriginal land, and I got here via the Monash Freeway, also known as a car park, which had an accident and a breakdown and police and block lane. So it was a bit beyond my control. So apologies for being late, because it's not good form, but I'm able to be.
To turn on your video?
Oh, I think it is on. Oh, no. The video, my video is on.
Yeah, oh well, it's not showing. Never mind.
I've been on video the whole time. So yeah. Since I got here. Yeah, it's definitely on. So if I click it, it will be stop video. But look, like everyone, you know, I owe thanks to Susan and Renata, because as well as all of you wonderful women getting opportunities as writers, I've also had this opportunity and many opportunities as an editor, and the privilege of working with wonderful authors and helping craft their words is a huge honour and a huge responsibility that I take really seriously. And I just, working with 38 authors with this book, just the amount of trust, reciprocity of, working together to hone, like it might be a word and a comma there. It's been an experience of working with people who care so much about the written word down to the finest detail and grammar, and that is what I love. And so some of you have never met me, some of you don't know me, some of you don't know me very well, but you were all willing to take the leap with a creative piece that, reading the book, it's obvious to the reader that these pieces come from the heart and mean a lot to every person who's written them. And to send something over email and entrust it into the hands of someone you may not really know, to polish it and get it ready for publication, is a huge leap of faith and trust. And I'm really privileged to have had a role in doing all that. The other thing, Angela Buckingham is one of the authors. She couldn't be here tonight, but at the launch that we did at La Mama, she said, when she was talking about the book, how feminism is about community, and when you're in an anthology, you're joining a particular feminist community. And, it's true. So in some way now I feel bound and tied to all the women in this book, and all the women who have helped put this book together, some whose names, aren't on the cover or as an author, but including all my colleagues, Rachel, Danielle, Marilyn, Sharon, and Caitlin at Spinifex Press. So the creation of a book needs community, and being in a book creates a permanent community. And so I just feel a huge affinity with all the women that are in this book. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity, having worked on this anthology. And I hope that you're all pleased with the final outcome and that you can help sell the book to the world and sing its praises, because I think everyone has discovered a voice that they may not have been very familiar with, or come to it in a different way, seen a new side to someone that they thought that they knew what their writing was like. So it's a real journey of discovery to have an anthology in your hands like this. And thank you all for trusting me, and thank you, Susan and Renata, for the opportunity.
Well, as I said before, Pauline, you suggested it as part of our celebration of coming into 30. And I referred to you as the #1 Eagle Eye editor. And we simply would not be able to publish books without Pauline. She saves us from many embarrassments. Now, Pauline, did you want to read something?
No, I will pass on that, but I would invite people to check that there is a very, very short little piece from me in the book, which of course I got Susan to edit, because everyone needs editing, including editors if they're doing their own writing. So, but that was another thing that impressed me with this book. I have worked, in the past or in other fields with people who write and think that all their words are too precious to ever change. But the best writers are the ones that like being edited. And Susan has shown me that. And everyone in this book was open to being edited. Some needed very little edits, but everyone was open to it. And so I think that's a mark that everyone in this book is a bloody brilliant writer. That's my view. So,
Pauline, I remember you saying you wanted to finish by reading Jordie's final poem in the book.
Yeah, I love that poem, and I think everyone would have read and knows that Jordie Albiston, she is the only one with multiple pieces in the book, but it seemed like the right thing to do, because she had given permission for the poems to be published, but then passed away before she ever saw the project come to fruition. And when I first got the Wimmera poem, I read it and thought this needs to be the last piece in the book. When she passed away, it seemed even more fitting, and those of you who have read it would realise. So I'll just go grab my copy and I'll read that poem. So here we are, the last piece in the book, Wimmera. Where am I going until I am there against the Wimmera sky? This travel is larger than you or I. They go by so fast, those scads of paddock, ubiquitous rust buckets, stuck in the wheat. But that's more or less death, I guess. Bitumen stretches, sweats on. And where am I going? And where have I gone? This travel always much more than me. The eucalypts passing say, calm, calm. But even the rocks here come to harm. Words and flies hum through my head, and something's tired, perhaps even dead. A black snake undoes itself somewhere, and then I hear it. One last breath. But that's just life, more or less.
Okay. Well, it is a fabulous poem, as all of them are, and these poems will actually be published in a collection that's coming out later this year with Punter and Watman. So look out for Jordie's latest book coming in July, I think. Now it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Renata. Renata is also a contributor to the book, and she's a biologist and critic of reproductive technologies and surrogacy, and she occasionally ventures into fiction.
I was just going to say, and she is a fiction writer, you should say.
I did.
No, joke aside, I was terribly, terribly moved and pleased when Pauline actually accepted my piece, because, as you know, I'm not really known for my fiction or poetic qualities, but, you know, who knows? There might even be a novel in me. Just check this page. Anyway, that last poem, Pauline, it was really, really moving that you just read that. And you know, I don't know if Jordie had any inkling of what was going to happen when she wrote this. It just seems so anticipating the future in some way, in some very sad way. Anyway, thank you to all of you for this fabulous, fabulous book. First of all, of course, to all the contributors. I mean, it is really a treasure trove. I mean, I had the pleasure of proofreading all the pieces, and that was really fantastic. But I have reread them, and there's so many really good pieces in there. And of course, they're really all fabulous writers, as Pauline said. I also really want to thank Sarah for your brilliant introduction this evening. I was most impressed how you managed to get everyone in your introduction. That's really was quite a feat without making it sort of like boring or anything. And Pauline, you have to listen to that. It was really, really good. Then, apart from the contributors, Pauline was fantastic. And yes, she moaned and groaned from time to time, but we all have to do that. Putting together an anthology is time-consuming, difficult, and takes ages. And Pauline mistressed all of this fantastically well. And it is a very beautiful book, and it's a good book to just open and start reading a piece. And I think that's probably the hallmark of a good book, when you can just open it and read a piece and you're still entranced by these wonderful stories and poems. I'm also very pleased with everybody who's been here this evening. A few favorites of mine, like Robyn Rowland, who of course should have had a story in this book, but she couldn't because her father was dying, and obviously she did not have the time to devote to writing a story. And then I see some hardcore non-fiction writers like Betty McClellan. Now, Betty, maybe there's a life for you too as a fiction writer. Who knows? And Coralie, who also should write a story one of these days. So thank you also for coming. If you haven't got enough Zoom launches in your life, think about the 8th of March, International Women's Day, and come to our Zoom launch of Kajsa Ekman's latest book. What's it called? On the Meaning of Women. It's a fabulous book. She's very funny. She will be, sorry, what?
The Meaning of Sex.
What? What did I say?
Woman.
The Meaning of Woman. Yeah, well, I think woman has to be there everywhere. So it's The Meaning of Sex. She will tune in from Sweden, and she's a fabulous speaker and very witty. And Bronwyn Winter, formerly from Sydney University, will launch the book. So that is something to look forward to. It will also be on YouTube, as this will be. And actually, Pauline already mentioned the names. I mean, you know, Susan and I don't do Spinifex just by ourselves. We couldn't do it if we didn't have such a fabulous team around us. So Pauline is part of this fabulous team. Rachel McDermott, who is our publicity manager. Caitlin, who I don't know if she's here, she does all the social media. And Danielle Osborne, who is our new office manager. And meanwhile, Marilyn and Sharon are somewhere gallivanting around in Australia and having a lovely time. And but Danielle has taken over and is wonderful. And we are very, very lucky that we got such a very good, what's the word, follower-upper from Marilyn, who was obviously fabulous for over 20 years. I think that is all I want to say, other than go and talk about the book and talk about Spinifex. And thank you for all your nice wishes. We had just today the news that a sister feminist publishing house from Germany has just called it quits after 30 years. And I thought, yeah, I understand why, because it is a lot of work, but we keep on doing it. We keep on publishing very, very, you know, important books that we think, and books that other publishers wouldn't even go near. And we're very, very proud of that. And also, Lucy, I just wanted to say to you, if you're still here, some of us still write on surrogacy. I obviously never got over it. I was just listening to a podcast today that I have done with an American writer, El Camihira, which was on surrogacy. So, you know, there we are. But my story in this book is not on surrogacy. So obviously I can write about other things. So I think this marks the end of this wonderful event. So thank you to all for coming. Thank you all to the writers for reading. To the others who couldn't be here, thank you. Maybe you can also then watch it on YouTube, and go out, enjoy your evening and be merry, and maybe come for the 8th of March to our celebration of Kajsa's new book. If not, enjoy International Women's Day. Thank you. Bye.
And I might add that Lucy's story was in Angels of Power, which was our very first book and our first anthology. So it's like bookends.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And that was a very good book too.
So thank you to everybody. It's been wonderful to be here. And Rachel is just putting up the information on how to get the book. Please let your friends know that they can buy it directly from our site if it's not in a bookshop, and that it's possible to buy it if by some chance you're in North America or you're in the UK and Europe and watching this on YouTube later. You can also get books there, or you can buy directly from our website. Thank you very much. And thank you to Rachel for being co-host and doing the things that I don't like doing.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rachel.